So with every photo texture, as you can see that I'm using the same technique which I've been using from the start, that I take the photo and I transform it. I use the levels, I use desaturation, and that's it. And all I have to do then is to just use my artistic vision and come up with better placement of that texture so that it supports my concept and not overpowers it. Although we see many people, many young artists using the photo bashing technique, and their work does not look cool because of photo bashing, and because they rely on photo and not on their own artistic abilities, and that's a disaster. So that's why we began by doing the sketch, so that we can control our textures. This kind of rock formation is also giving an alien look. So finding a good reference is a key. Find a good reference which is in high resolution, and you can use even one image, and you can use elements from that image into different areas. So I used this texture and I applied it as a clipping mask layer for the foreground layer, so that it does not go outside the bounds of the foreground layer. Adjusting the values, and you can make the clipping mask just by pressing Alt and clicking in between the layers. Using soft airbrush to erase. And as I said, it's gonna be atmospheric. It's gonna contain so much atmosphere that it's gonna eat up the darker areas fairly quickly. So we are gonna be left with areas which are bright, and that is gonna create a sense of drama and mood. I like this image as a foreground element, and I think that's gonna work very good. And now I'm gonna use some sand element on top of the rocks, and I think that's gonna give some cool effect. Desaturate that and remove the colors. Transform it. And now this is the somewhat of a advanced technique. At least I did not know a few months ago, and this is a really powerful way to control your values and where you wanna put the texture and remove it. So again, this really gives you a fine control. And there we have these two sliders, and the above slider will control the selected layer, which is the sand texture layer, and the slider which is below, this will control where your selected texture layer is going to be visible. So if I don't want the texture to fill in my darker spaces, then I'm going to use the black slider, and I'm going to push it towards the right, and that will reveal the darks. So yeah, So this is really cool and amazing way to control your textures. So as you can see that I'm able to easily control, and even I'm able to split my black arrow by pressing Alt, and that will give me even more control on the texture. Removing the extreme highlights because it was a daytime shot, and our sketch is not a daytime shot. It's even though it's got a sun, but the lighting condition is mainly soft lighting condition because of too much mist, and that is not allowing the sun to put too much light into the scene. And if you take a duplicate of that layer with that layer blending option on, it will remain, it will keep that, and you can adjust it again to fit according to your need. That was too harsh. Let's just try to dial it down. Okay. Let's collapse all of this, and let's get to designing the actual building, which is the focal point. So let's grab these images to start with. So in this image, because the negative spaces there is so tiny, and if I need to extract that, if I need to extract any element from this oil rig, I need to spend so much time into it every single time, right? So for that I'm gonna have to mask the whole thing out, and then later on, whenever I need any portion of it, I just have to use the marquee tool and select freely and just take out the bits that I like. So for that, for the fine masking control, we need to go into channels and then get the most contrasting layer and duplicate that, so that when we use the levels, and with the levels we can create the most contrast. We can create a black and white image, complete black and white image from that, so that it's easy to take a selection from it. And by control clicking the layer thumbnail, it will select the white areas, and you can invert by pressing control I, and that will invert and select the dark areas. And now I'm gonna duplicate the layer, selected layer, into another layer, and that way I can just easily select and copy without worrying about the negative space. Let's just transform and see if I like this way. The clipping, I use the clipping mask because I don't want it to right now change my silhouette of the building design, and that will come a little later. I don't want to completely change the silhouette, but I'm gonna still do some minor adjustments. Changing some values. And because the building already was dark, so I'm gonna need only the brighter areas. So using my image on lighten layer will only reveal the light areas and will remove the darker areas. And now I'm gonna need a perspective guide, so let's just create and take a layer, and using the line tool, let's create a perspective grid. I'm using the bright red in order to be able to clearly see. Creating a vanishing point and creating a grid from that vanishing point 1. The placement of this vanishing point will determine the orientation of the building. So because my building was nearly 90 degree, was parallel to the canvas, so my vanishing point 1 needed to be within my canvas. So I just took another copy of the perspective layer, and I'm gonna transform it into a second vanishing point, and I'm gonna change the color by pressing Ctrl I, and that is gonna invert the red and make it into blue. Flip the layer. Let's lock this layer so I don't destroy it accidentally. Let's take another selection. I like this area. All I'm doing right now is I'm trying to just fill up these spaces, and then I'll be designing it. I'm gonna keep the design of it vertical in order to show the height of this structure. In designing, you need to be careful of all these things, that even the texture can give a sense of height and depth. Although if you think really about in 3D, then this is a 3D building element, right? But from that far, it's almost like a texture. So we are treating it as a texture. But if we were building it in 3D, then it would be a building element. And because this building has a function, this is a military building, and the military buildings and buildings related to scientific research, they are very functional, and they are not built as an artistic element. So there's gonna be a lot of pipes and communication equipment, communication towers, antenna. So that will give us the effect of military outpost or scientific research building, something like that. And that fits into our genre of sci-fi. And then now I'm trying to select some areas and create my own detail. This is the really artistic part after photo bashing. So I'm not only relying on photos, I'm also overpainting it, and that will give my own artistic touch into this. You can also use line tool in that, and that will give you crisp edge. So whatever the tool you use, as long as it serves the purpose, then that is completely fine. I mean, I could make these lines with a round brush too. That does not matter. As long as I'm able to design it, then that's completely fine. I'm gonna give this area a plain look just to make it different from other parts. I'm now using the gradient tool, and that gives me a smooth transition of values. Just some texture, random texture, because this building is not brand new, so it's gonna be having some textures in it. Some negative spaces to show levels. Maybe this can show some architecture interior, and maybe we can add some lights which is showing through. We can do it later. The right side is going to be somewhat brighter, but not that bright, because of course, as I said, it's going to be a misty environment. But there is a sun, and the sun is not going to affect that much, so we need to add that very slightly